Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
I just thought of a joke that I might tell to make everyone feel a little bit more comfortable. And so when I was asked to introduce Amelia for this presentation on Hygge, which I was not familiar with, I misunderstood and thought it was hookah. So I thought, what a great idea to bring water pipes and flavored tobacco into the classroom, and it would really make people feel more comfortable. Of course, that's not what we're talking about today, but I thought, what an interesting little pun. I didn't actually think that, but I thought, that's a great story to tell. But I will say, in the spirit of today's presentation, I do encourage everyone, because they're all sort of scattered around, to come closer to the stage, right? To sit close to a colleague or friend, and to make yourselves cozy and comfortable. But yes, as Tim said, my name is Mike Roberson from the Department of English, and I'm pleased to introduce my colleague, Dr. Amelia Horsburgh. As we share a hallway in Building 345, sometimes known as the secret hallway, it is not uncommon to hear Amelia before she arrives to her office. Where, with a characteristic joie de vivre, her voice boasts good humor and authentic concern. Perhaps a combination of Mary Poppins and Mr. Rogers. I often also hear students arrive for office hours, welcomed by the same encouraging and supportive voice. Inevitably, they leave more confident and with a spring in their step. Amelia's most recent scholarship has focused on pedagogy, including efficient assessment and arts-based learning, but also the proper care and feeding of graduate student teachers. In fact, Amelia would like you to know that while she can groom a graduate student to be a better teacher, she can't take care of a houseplant to save her life. Amelia is the recipient of the Provost Award for Outstanding Graduate Student Teacher from the University of Saskatchewan, and the first prize for her lip-synced rendition of Madonna's Vogue at the Tecumseh Corn Festival. This included accompanying choreography, I'm told, but I have yet to see it. So, please join me in extending a Hygge welcome to Dr. Amelia Horsburgh.
Success. I've got the microphone in my hand. Good morning, everybody. Hi. I'm Amelia Horsburgh. It's so lovely to have you all here this morning, here at VIU in the theater. I have been seated where you are to see various theater productions. Never have I stood on the stage with the mic, all the power that comes along with holding this microphone. Oh, it's thrilling. Now, folks, I have to warn you, I've had a lot of coffee this morning. So, there's gonna be a lot of movement across the stage. I might break into dance at some point, so just buckle up, Buttercup, because this is gonna be a good time. All right, so let's get her started, shall we? I want to start by giving a few words of thanks, because what I've learned in my teaching and my scholarship, it's never an individual practice that we do, right? There's tons of folks that are behind our every move, and what we do. We couldn't do what we do without our amazing colleagues, and they range from folks like students, right? If we don't have students, I'm out of a job and I can't pay my mortgage. So we need our students 100%. So I want to thank, if you are a student, if you took time out of your Friday morning to come join us, thank you very much. All my staff, colleagues, our faculty, my mariners, curious Nanaimoites, thank you. It means a lot that you would take time from your Friday to come spend it here on campus. I also want to thank Catherine Wellwagen from the Department of History for all her help getting today's colloquium ready. So thank you to Catherine. I want to thank, of course, Dr. Finnegan, Theo Finnegan from the English department, who couldn't be here today. He's teaching. But if you were listening to the radio on Wednesday afternoon this week, you know that I did a 30-minute spot with Theo talking about my teaching practice and how I infuse it with Hygge. So thank you to Theo for doing that with me. Robin Davies, who is recording that amazing session. Dr. Lewis this morning, of course, for doing our land acknowledgement and seeing today's event. Dr. Stanley, Marty Stanley, our amazing dean, for coming out. I really appreciate it. Dr. Robertson, of course, for that amazing introduction. And Robin Boxwell and all his tech team, including Sam, for helping me feel so comfortable up here this morning. It's really, really appreciated, so thank you. All right, let's start it up then. So, we're gonna be talking about Hygge. What is Hygge? We're gonna try to answer that together today. We're gonna talk about engagement. What does student engagement look like? Okay. We're also gonna talk about how we're gonna get there and why I believe deeply that it's important to do so. I think in the 21st century, our classrooms and our expectations of our students and our expectations of our faculty, they're different than they were 10, 20, 30 years ago. So we have to be comfortable in making some of those changes that I believe need to happen in our classrooms. All right, gang, so let's look at a definition of what Hygge is exactly, yeah? Here we go. And I promise this is the only slide I will read to you today. So, Hygge, it's about an atmosphere, an experience, rather than about things. It's about being with the people we love, a feeling of home, a feeling that we are safe, that we are shielded from the world, and allow ourselves to let our guard down. Now, I don't expect all of my students to love me at the end of the day. However, I do believe that we can have loving, respectful working relationships in the classroom, and that's what I strive towards. So many of you may have heard of Hygge before and have thought of the different accoutrements that go along with Hygge. So that being candlelight, comfy sweaters, reading socks, right? A crackling fire, snow falling gently through the window, sitting there with a steaming cup of coffee or mulled wine or your beverage of choice, yes? All right, so I'm going to tell you today that it's not possible, unfortunately, to have a crackling fire, candlelight, warm, cozy blankets in our classrooms, sadly. So instead, what I'm going to do is provide you with some strategies of ways that we can provide Hygge for our students in other ways, all right? And in doing so, we can provide the opportunity for engagement and deep learning for our students. That's my goal in the classroom. All right, so there's a Hygge manifesto. And in this manifesto, they talk about the different feelings that go along with Hygge. And I've listed them here. So things like atmosphere, presence, pleasure, equality, gratitude, harmony, comfort, truce, togetherness, and shelter. Now, we can't accomplish all of those things, nor do I think we want to in our classrooms. However, I want to go through these and talk about different ways that we can achieve some of these and should strive to do so. So if Hygge is a feeling of coziness, what strategies can we implement in the classroom to create that feeling? So let's go through some of these together. Atmosphere. Like I said, we can't necessarily, in our building 345, recreate that beautiful ideal of what Hygge can be. And I'm talking about going back to the blankets, the fire, the soft, beautiful lighting that makes us all look very attractive. We can't achieve that in building 345, right? If any of you have been in that building, you know what I speak of, yes? It's the furthest thing from Hygge. We do, however, have a lovely trees outside, so that embodies some of that Hygge. So looking outside, we feel the Hygge coming in. All right, so we do our best with atmosphere. We have the building that we have, so we're gonna make the best of it, right? All right, presence. I physically have to be there, my students have to physically be there, but presence isn't enough, right? Many of my students can come to class and they're physically there, but if they're not mentally there, they're not emotionally in the classroom, then there's a disconnect. And it's the same with myself. If I come to class and my mind's on a bunch of other things, how my son's gonna get to dance practice later, what groceries I have to pick up on the way home, then I am not present, right? I'm not emotionally present for my students. So it's a goal for myself, my students, that we're there physically, but also emotionally, and we're there. We're there to practice, to learn together, right? Pleasure. I don't think a lot of students, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think a lot of students necessarily equate when they come to class with pleasure. But I think they should, and I want them to. And it's the same with teaching faculty. I don't think we always think of our teaching practice as pleasurable, right? We think of pleasure with eating chocolate or going for a hike in nature, right? That's pleasurable, but maybe not so much teaching, right? Especially if you've been doing it for a few years and you're in that groove. So our goal today is to talk about how to find that pleasure again in our teaching. Equality. And this is one term that I want to put a pin in and I want to come back to later on in today's presentation. Equality is sort of a problematic word for me in this manifesto. It doesn't work perfectly for my ideas around Hygge and teaching. I like to use the term instead of equality, that we work towards equity. And I'll talk more about this a little bit later in the presentation. So let's put a pin in this, equality, and come back to it. Gratitude. This is something we have to work on as a collective, right? We need to be grateful for the fact that we're lucky enough to be students at a post-secondary institution as amazing as VIU. I am incredibly grateful every morning when I open my eyes and I think, it's a teaching day. Oh my gosh, I am so excited. I can't wait to get to work, right? Even this morning, I thought maybe last night when I was going to sleep, I might be a little anxious when I wake up Friday morning because I have to talk to all of you with a microphone in the theater. And yet I woke up this morning and I was excited. It's like, it's not just gonna be 30 people that I'm gonna teach to, it's gonna be to an entire audience, right? Of not just students at VIU, but folks from the community, staff from the amazing community of VIU who don't usually get to see us teaching, right? Same with my fellow colleagues from the English department or the arts and humanities. we don't get to see one another teach ever. So I'm super grateful for this opportunity to be here, not just here today, but be here, teaching at this institution. Dan, I am grateful. And I think we all need to feel that as students as well. Harmony. Well, classroom spaces aren't always harmonious, we know that, right? And that's probably a good thing, that they're not always harmonious. They have to be, however, respectful, right? So I tell my students, our classroom together is one where we can all share our synthesis of a reading, or our experiences that we bring to the reading, fantastic. But if you cross that line towards something that's starting to sound like not just opinion, but hate speech, that's where we shut that down, right? And that's my responsibility as the professor in the room, and something that I work towards. So not necessarily harmony, but respect and respectful conversation that happens, right? Comfort, and this is one that we're really gonna focus on today. Comfort, like I said, is difficult as a professor in post-secondary, because I don't have like a homeroom, like a grade 4 teacher or a grade 7 teacher, and I don't have a classroom that I have control over. Instead, I wander across campus for different teaching throughout the day. So sometimes I'm in 345, sometimes I'm in a building across campus to teach. It's always changing, and I have no control over what that space really is gonna look like. So I do my best to bring various and sundry props. And yeah, I really liked the theater department in high school. So I really enjoy props, and I'm gonna talk about and show you how I use them in my teaching to provide some of that hygge for my students and for myself, right? We spend as faculty just as much time here in the classroom or prepping to teach or mark as we do with our own families. So I want to have fun too, right? This isn't just a job for me. This is about a calling and something that I want to have fun every morning when I come to work, all right? Truce, I think that goes along with harmony. It really does. It's being respectful about one another's opinions and maintaining that respectful relationship throughout our time together in a classroom. Yeah. Togetherness. Some students have a lot of difficulty being in physically a classroom and having to work with others. It's really challenging for some of my students, and I know that, for various reasons. And so we really work hard together, especially using some of our props, as a way to build connection and kinship with one another and with myself as their educator. And last one is shelter. Now we can think of shelter as the physical space, right? Or we can think of it in more of a metaphorical sense, in that I am here to not shelter you from the outside world, but to shelter who you are as a person in your spirit. I'm here to shelter that and make sure that you have room in my classroom to show that spirit and feel safe to do so, right? Because I think a lot of us struggle with being ourselves, right? I know I struggled with that too a bit when I started teaching way back in 2005. I started teaching at Case Western Reserve University, and that's in Cleveland, Ohio. And when I first started teaching, I tried to just mimic what I had seen other fantastic professors do in my undergrad, because I thought they were great. I loved their classes. I will just imitate what they did, and it will be grand, right? Yeah, not so grand. I hate to break it to you. It was not so grand. And why wasn't it? Because it wasn't authentically me, right? I'm not, like my best friend teaches at the University of Saskatchewan, and her name is Dr. Ann Martin. And Ann is a fantastic lecturer. She can stand in front of a room of 120 undergrads and teach the most amazing lecture, right? And she chunks it, and she's able to get them doing active learning at the same time. It's beautiful. But I'm not Ann, and I can't try to just mimic what she does in the class. I have to do it my own way. So how I started talking about that, I don't know. How I moved from there to shelter. But there you go. That's just a little segue. And this happens all the times when I teach. My students will look at me after talking for a couple minutes and they'll be like, Professor Horsburgh, how did you get to this point? And I'll be like, I don't know. It's the coffee, obviously. All right. Now, my clicker, here it is. Let's go on to the next slide, shall we? All right, oh, this is a good one. So now we're gonna get into the fun stuff, the props. The thing that I hope makes my students feel Hygge-like when they come to my class, yeah? All right, hominess very much implies a feeling of authenticity, warmth, and togetherness. That's what I want my students to feel. So how do I do that? Well, I try to make sure that all my learners, regardless of who they are, what their stories are in life, how they've come to BIU, regardless of any of that, any cognitive disabilities, physical disabilities, whatever bag of hammers you bring to the classroom, whatever that might be, you're welcome here. And this is how we're gonna make sure you flourish, okay? Book buddies. You can see I brought some of them here today. Book buddies are basically my stuffies from when I was little, not as a 39-year-old, though I still really enjoy the stuffies. This is my Stewie the sturgeon. Stewie comes with me to a lot of my classes and always my exams. Why do you think Stewie might come with me? And yeah, I'm asking my learners. You're my learners today, gang. Why do you think Stewie might come with me to an exam? Just for fun? Yes. Emotional support, 100%. Gold star for you. That's right. Many of my students, I can tell, sit down to their 3-hour exam and this fear washes over them and they stare at me like, I'm not feeling very well, Professor Horsburgh. I'm scared. They're scared. There's no reason to be scared. My exams aren't scary, they're fun, I tell them. They don't believe me. So Stewie comes with me and he sits on the desk of students who I can tell are feeling a little uncomfortable. Stewie makes a visit to their spot for a little while. He brings good juju, as we say, all right? So, book buddies, they come to my classroom. I give my students the option, if you'd like a book buddy for the day, or our time together in the class, you're welcome to help yourself. And more often than not, most students will take a book buddy. And some of them hold them like babies. Some of them just sit them on their desk. Some of them pat them while the class is going on. Whatever. There's no right or wrong way to have a book buddy. Our book buddies are there to make them feel comfortable. And it really works well for any of my students who have issues with anxiety. I have many students who I know they've told me privately that they struggle with anxiety and they find the classroom really difficult. So many of the Hygge elements that I bring to the class help with that. And I know they help because I myself struggle with anxiety. So I know if it's working for me as their instructor, I hope to hell it's working for them too as students, right? So we've got our book buddies. There's another thing that I like to do some semesters, and I don't do it every semester. I'm not currently doing this one, but I've done it last fall was the last time I did it. So the basket of plenty. You can see this nice basket back here. It doubles as my basket of plenty. And I know that food insecurity is a real thing for some of our students. It's not something our students like to talk about, but it's real, and we need to acknowledge it. So sometimes I'll go to the grocery store and I'll buy a bunch of Pop-Tarts, and granola bars, applesauce, all the delicious, nutritious foods that sometimes our students don't have the extra cash for, right? It's all going to rent, it's all going for their very expensive textbooks. And so I bring these items to class and provide them at the front of the room and say, you know what, gang, if you're hungry this morning, you just help yourself. And so there's no pressure and there's no outing of anybody if they are hungry. They just help themselves. And then I have some students who will, throughout term, replenish the basket. When they go to the grocery store, they'll pick up an extra box of granola bars and add it to our basket of plenty. It's a lovely teaching tool, and it's one that I wish we didn't have to implement, right? But in a lot of ways, it builds that nice kinship in and amongst our students. So that's my basket of plenty. And last, I'm going to tell you about my Hygge hamper. So my Hygge hamper, again, it's my basket back here. I bring it to class with me, and it works really well, this strategy, when you've got an 8:30 class, and I always have the 8:30 classes. I like it that way though, I'm a morning person, so 8:30 is just fine with me. So, around 8 o'clock, if I'm driving by myself, I usually roll in around 8, and I'll go to the classroom that I'm going to be teaching in, and I drop off my Hygge hamper. In my hamper, I've got Play-Doh, putty, cards, chess, checkers, coloring books, markers, crayons, colored pencils, origami paper, anything that students can do to keep their hands busy and engaging with one another maybe before class even starts. Because a lot of the students actually show up early, I think because they want to spend extra time with me, or it's because they want to get a parking spot. It's one or the other thing, okay? So they come to class, they got that option of, ooh, I can color, or I can play poker. Did I bring any money to class with me today? Yes. And a couple of them will sit down and play cards together. It's a great way, it's a great tool for students to meet others, new friends, especially early in term. It's a great way for our students who are new to NIMO, who have come from elsewhere in Canada, elsewhere in the world. It's a wonderful way for them to meet some of their classmates in the room, yeah? Because it can be a very lonely experience when you first come to a new institution. I know. I've been an international student 3 times myself in my life, so I know what that experience can feel like, especially at the beginning, right? A lot of tearful phone calls back home in that first week, yes? Yes, maybe it was just me, I don't know. Okay, so those are some of the ways that I bring different Hygge elements into the class. Let's move on. Let's talk about engagement now and how Hygge helps us engage our learners in the classroom. So how can students take part in and participate in their own learning? And I think we have a lot of assumptions as educators when we first come into the classroom, when we first start teaching. Assumptions about what our learners are bringing to us, so what skills they already have under their belt, their maturity levels. We've got, I think, assumptions about what that's going to be. And unfortunately, those assumptions are usually just that. They're assumptions. They're not right. They're incorrect. So instead, we have to spend that first little while getting to know our students, what their goals are, where they're coming from, what they want to achieve here at VIU, and how I can help them get there, how I can help them achieve their goals from my class, right? So how do we engage our learners in their own learning experience? there's a lot of different ways we can do that, right? So we talk a lot about active learning and how do we get students actively participating in the classroom in order to create those deep learning experiences. So not just surface level experiences, but nice deep learning experiences. How do we do that as educators? Well, there's a couple of ways that I like to do that and make my students become agents in their own learning. So here we go. You'll see here a photo of some of my students from just a few weeks ago. And we talked about, I don't even remember what we talked about that day in class. Doesn't matter. But I brought my book buddies, and it was the first time I brought my book buddies. And they were just over the moon for these book buddies, as you can see here. So my book buddies are something, of course, that we use, but there's other ways too that we can create those deep learning experiences. One of the ways that I like to do that is by making my students have the power. Right? You know that song, I've Got the Power? I'm dating myself, aren't I? Okay. Professors, and I think we feel very comfortable having all the power in the classroom, yes? Notice how I just stood up really straight. I've got the power, I'm in charge, I'm in the front of the room. However, when we give our students the power, right, if we give them a task that they have to accomplish in the room, it gives them the opportunity to learn about what they need to do, say, learn, the strategies that are going to help them when it comes to exam time, right? If I can teach them the strategies of how to learn and how to participate in the classroom, then they're able to take those strategies out into the world, right? I'm not just teaching them to pass my exam. I'm teaching them writing skills that will take them to, other classrooms here at VIU, but above and beyond into the community after the fact, right? So how do we engage then our students by using this Hygge? How does it engender engagement? So I try to use lots of elements of universal design. Now, universal design is started with when we talk about architecture and how can we make our spaces more accessible for everyone. Now, I try to do that in my classroom. I try to make sure that the room physically is working for everybody, right? During exams, I always request big tables so my students can spread out their paper. That's a big one for me. And here you'll see the term equitable. And equitable, inclusive spaces. So what's the difference then between, remember earlier in an earlier slide we talked about the difference between equality and equity, right? Equality, if you've ever seen the meme, everybody's with me on a meme, you know what I'm talking about? Yes? Okay. So when you see an image, and I'll describe the image to you, it's three people, three youngsters who are trying to see a baseball game, okay? The tallest one can see over the fence and can watch the baseball game. The middle child, can't see the baseball game, the fence is too high. He's vertically challenged like me, okay? So can't see over the fence. And then the littlest guy, can't see anything, also way too small to see over the fence. Now, equality means that we're gonna give them each a stool to step on so they can see over the fence. Well, the stool certainly helps the tall person. Now he can really see. The middle child can almost see over the fence now. And the little guy, still can't see over the fence. That stool didn't help enough, right? Still can't see the game. Equity means instead of being equal about how we're going to parse out different aids, that instead the littlest learner, the littlest student who's trying to see over that fence, well, they might need a couple little stools to stand on to see over that fence. So equity means that student gets as many aids as they need in order to participate fully, in order to see the game, yeah? Now, in the perfect world, that fence would be gone, right? We would be able to get rid of that fence. and that would be the removal of that systemic barrier. And so that's what I'm trying to do in my class through different strategies. One of them that I try to tell my students about is leaning in and leaning out, and that's around classroom etiquette, right? When students come to us, they have different ideas about how to participate in a classroom. Maybe it means talking a lot, right? Raising your hand all the time, the Hermione Grangers out there, yeah? Lots of hand raising. And for others, they just want to hang back and they just want to take it all in and let it wash over them. And what I tell my students at the beginning of term and what I reiterate to them is the importance that we lean in, force yourself, try to lean in at some point during the class, okay? And then once you've leaned in and maybe added something to the discussion, then you're allowed to lean out, okay? And then you can relax for a sec and do more of that deep thinking and listening, right? Active listening, not just active participation. More is just more a lot of the time. We also want to make sure that we're supporting our students that have either a cognitive or physical disability in the classroom. How important it is that we do that. So I make sure that not only do I talk about the wonderful resource that DAS, Disability Access Services, is here on campus, but that I walk the walk, that I tell them, you never have to out yourself with me, your professor. Instead, DAS just lets me know what accommodations you require. How many stools do you need, right? What accommodations can I make in my classroom to make sure that you're successful this term, okay? And many students, that requires them to go down to DAS and take that big step, which can be very scary, to talk about whatever disability they might have. So in order to make sure that they feel comfortable doing so, I talk about my own cognitive disabilities, right? And I think that puts them at ease a little bit, that, oh, my instructor, she also struggles with anxiety and depression. Well, you know what? Okay, she does. She can still come to work every morning and function and hold down a job and look at all this amazing stuff that she can do. I can do that too. So I model the fact that I'm comfortable talking about these things, and you should feel comfortable advocating for the supports that you need to, right? I have to model that for my students. Okay, now, Hygge, what could possibly go wrong about bringing these types of supports to the classroom? Well, the term has roots in being a little bit parochial or cocooning oneself from the outside world, and I don't believe universities are meant to do that, right? So it's not a perfect fit for what we do as educators in the post-secondary world. Instead, I want us to think about that it's not a cocooning or a nostalgia for a simpler or more pleasant time. Instead, it's a way for us to expand our boundaries, all right? So it's not about me encircling my students in a metaphoric way and saying, this classroom is a safe space. Yes, it is, but I want them to carry that safeness, that comfort outside of our rooms. I want them to bring that spirit to our entire campus, to our community, to our country, right? I don't think that we need to be so focused on ourselves, right? I think we can focus on the other a little bit more and having a little bit more care and compassion for others, right? Okay, so it's not a perfect fit, yeah? We need to find ways to make Hygge work for us. That is not just a cocooning, right? Universities aren't here to cocoon. We're here to make you strong and feel safe and bring that out to the world with you. Okay, And this is where I think that VIU is the great fit for myself, in that our slogan is matter here. Now, there's some caveats to that, but I firmly believe that I matter here, you matter here. We're gonna matter here together, right? And how do we do that? It starts with making sure that we build a syllabi that gives our students the information that they need to succeed. Yeah? So it means including information like how I'm gonna grade your assignments, right? Here is the rubric that I'm going to use, so you know exactly how I'm going to assess your learning, right? How you can build your assignments to make sure that you're gonna be successful. That's my job, to make sure that that's happening. We model this ethos through our behavior. So I talked earlier about giving my students power. It means giving them choice, maybe, in their assignments. Here's an example. In my English 125 class, I let my students choose for their final project from a list of 20 different texts, different food memoirs that they can read. So if they say on this list, oh my goodness, I can read, let's say, Anthony Bourdain's food memoir, Kitchen Confidential. I'm really keen to do that. I'm going to choose that one. Suddenly students are actually interested in the work they're going to do. Interested in the work they're going to do. Do you know how powerful that is? Because so many of our students come to a class and think, oh, I'm going to do what the professor tells me I'm going to do. No. I'm giving you the power to choose your own journey here. Here's the power. You choose the book you want to read. Choose something that excites you, that you're going to find pleasure in. Yeah? Because that's way more fun. And I'm going to get better results if you've written on something that you're actually interested in, right? And then I don't have to read, 30 papers all on the same topic. Instead, they're just all different, and it's wonderful. All right. We make mistakes. We all make mistakes. We all put our foot in our mouth at some point. We need to model as educators, when we make a mistake, how to overcome that mistake. Because some of our students, really, they don't know how to do that yet, okay? So I model, if I make a mistake, say with, something I've written on the board, I've written the wrong page number, or horrors, I made a spelling mistake on the board. How do I model getting over that spelling error? Let's say a student raises their hand, they say, Professor, I don't think there's an E at the end of that word. And I like to add E's to things because I learned French before I learned English. So I add E's to everything. So my students will say, Professor, there's no E on that word at the end. And I'll go, oh, you're absolutely right. Thank you so much for letting me know that, right? We don't get defensive. We don't fly off the handle. We just say, you know what? Thanks, I really appreciate you letting me know that, okay? And then I can correct it on the board, and we move on. It's not the end of the world, yeah? We need to model that to our students. Pronouns with name tense. Here's an example of what I mean by modeling how to get over making a mistake. At the beginning of term, I always ask my students to make me name tense. So put your name on there so I can learn it. I sort of pride myself on learning all of my students' names, all 120 every term. That's my goal. Now, so I have my students build their name tense, they put them in front of them, and I ask them to use them for the first couple of weeks while I learn their names. I also ask for their pronoun, okay? Let me know what your pronoun is, because sometimes I don't know. And I don't want to get it wrong, yeah? And I don't want your classmates to get it wrong. So let me know, are you comfortable with they? Are you comfortable with she? Are you comfortable with he? Let me know. Now, one time, it was this summer actually, we were doing that on the first day of class, and I used the incorrect pronoun for one of my students within like the first 5 minutes of class. Yep, I did that. I'm not perfect. I don't walk on water. And instantaneously, I felt, the shame wash over me. Because it was hurtful to the student, I know it was, and and it made me feel like garbage. So, how do you move on from that? Well, you send a very apologetic email, you apologize to the student, and you say, I am really sorry, I used the wrong pronoun. We were just building our name tags and putting our pronouns on there, and I goofed, and I'm really sorry, and it won't happen again. So mistakes happen, right? And it's one of the reasons why I try to build in those elements of making sure that my students feel safe, they've got their name tags, they've got their pronouns, nothing can go wrong. Well, sometimes things go wrong, and so we model how we move forward. Yeah. Okay, demonstrating care for our students. So it's very like to care for our students. It's not a stretch for me to have to care for my students. I love my students. I'll do anything for my students. You'll see here the Mariners. Yeah, I'm that person in the crowd who goes to all the sporting events, is like cheering my students on, because I have students on the ball team, on the soccer team, on the hockey teams, on the volleyball teams. They play every sport under the sun, and I go to their games. Because guess what? Their parent or parents probably live in another province, another country, and can't go to their games, right? And that's just a sad fact of geography in Canada. It's a big country. So I'll go and support my students, because A, I love sports, and B, I like to be that person in the crowd cheering on my students. It's fun for me. You see Stewie's up there on an exam booklet. You see we physically have got a picture of the library down here. Why do I have a picture of a gingerbread house? Oh, I'll tell you why we have a picture of a gingerbread house. Many of my students I have in my English classes are part of the hospitality management program here, or they're in the bakery program. Regardless, they work with food. Yeah, it's fantastic. So, Christmas time, it was one of their assignments to make gingerbread houses. Yeah. And they brought these gingerbread houses to Milner Gardens and put them on display. And they had like this contest for the gingerbread house, the best gingerbread house. So, me being me, I went to Milner Gardens and checked out all these amazing gingerbread houses with my family. We made it an evening event for all of us to go out and support the students. So that's what I mean about demonstrating care. So one of the amazing scholars and teachers out there, her name is Catherine Denial, and Catherine works at Knox College in Illinois. And what Catherine talks about in her research is having a pedagogy of kindness. So we want in our teaching practice to always remember kindness, yeah? I had an email this morning from a student saying, Professor, may I have an extension on my upcoming assignment? I'm sick, I was in the hospital, I'm not feeling great. Many instructors would say, in the back of their head maybe, I don't know if the student's telling me the truth, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to argue that's not the right approach. Instead, I want to have the approach of kindness. I believe my students. If they tell me I'm sick, I need an extension for a couple days on an assignment, I will say 100%. Get it in on Tuesday. Sounds good to me. I hope you're feeling better. That's a pedagogy of kindness. It's trusting our students. They'll tell us what they need to be successful. I want to listen to that. I have to listen to that as their instructor. When I have students arrive late to class, again, that little voice in the back of a professor's head says, they slept in, they must have been up all night playing video games or whatever it is, right? But in actuality, many times those later arrivals are because they had a child getting on the bus and the bus arrived late. Or they were taking care of younger siblings, and the younger siblings, I don't know, spilled milk on the table, whatever. They had car trouble. Their bus didn't arrive when it should have. I'm not there to judge them, right? As my 9-year-old will say, "Mommy, don't be judgy. Don't judge me." So I don't do that for my students. Instead, when my students come in late, I say, "Hey Judy, I'm sorry," or "No, I'm sorry." Instead, I'll say, "Hey Judy, great to see you come out of seat." Or, "Hi Levi, no worries, come on in." And they're usually very apologetic about coming in late. It's not a problem. We all have lives. It's okay. Come on in. I'm happy to have you. I'm glad you made the effort to get here today. Students who are unprepared, we all have that, right? Because students are busy. They sometimes come to class unprepared and not really ready to work. So instead, what do? We give them the space to become prepared in the classroom. So I'll give them some reading questions or prompting questions. Give them 5 minutes to at least skim some of the major elements from what we're going to talk about, okay? Give them the space to be successful. You always have the student who does the big yawn. Do you know what the big yawn is? Yeah, you know what the big yawn is. And they're very loud with that yawn, yeah? So instead, my role as professor is to just ignore that, just keep going. I don't think they're being rude. I think they honestly don't realize how tired they are. And maybe they just come off of graveyard shift, right? I don't know, right? Maybe they did. Maybe they were up all night working that part-time job in order to afford to come to school. It's not my place to judge. Students who just disappear, right, in term or halfway through term and they've gone MIA. I don't know where they are or what's happened to them. It's my policy if a student misses 2 classes in a row, I shoot them an email and I say, "Hey, just checking in. How are things going?" It's a 1-sentence email. But usually students will write me back and they'll say, "You know, this is what's going on," or they're very apologetic. "Don't worry, I'm going to be there next class." And that demonstrates kindness, right? And that they have a responsibility to come to class and engage. But at the end of the day, it's their choice to come or not. But it lets them know that I'm thinking about them. Late assignments, it's my policy. If a student asks for an extension, and it's honestly doesn't happen all the time, but when a student needs an extension, I grant it. I don't need to know why. You're a grown-up. You need an extra 24 hours? You got it. That's my pedagogy of kindness. So to the naysayers, to those of you out there, or maybe some of you might be thinking, I don't think, or do I want to implement Hygge or elements of kindness in my classroom. I don't mean kindness, but elements of making sure that my students feel comforted, safe, that this is a space where they can let their guard down, right? And really build community and kinship. So my question to you back would be, why wouldn't you? And why can't you? Right? This is an amazing space, the classroom, for us to build positive working relationships with one another. So for all of my faculty out there, I really encourage you to think about ways that you can implement Hygge-esque elements in the classroom. It might not be book buddies, right? It might not be a basket of plenty or a Hygge hamper. Fair enough. But find ways to make sure that when your students come to your classroom, they're going to find pleasure, they're going to find happiness, they're going to find comfort, right? Those are the things that I want my students to feel when they come to my classroom. That's my obligation as their instructor. I want them to feel those things. And I think we have to start having a larger conversation about how we can implement these elements at the post-secondary level. It's not just a matter of, well, you've gone through grade school, you've gone through high school, and now comes the strident real world, right, with a capital R. This is the real world. But it doesn't have to be shitty, right? Our classrooms don't have to be painful or laborious. They can be fun. They can be comforting. They can be pleasurable. And I think think it's our obligation to make sure that that's happening for our students. We've come to the end of my presentation today. So if you're interested in learning more about Hygge and implementing kindness and engagement in the classroom, or how you can build it as a student, right, in your own way, let's talk about that right now. I invite you to do that. Thank you.